Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining National Farmers Union today as we launch our Fairness for Farmers initiative. My name is Riley McDonnell, and I will be moderating today's virtual event. We are thrilled to have Senator Jon Tester and Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison joining us today. In addition to NFU President Rob LaRue, Montana Farmers Union President Walter Schweitzer, and Minnesota Farmers Union President Gary Wardish. Our program will start with comments from each of our speakers, followed by a brief Q&A. We invite members of the press to please submit your outlet and questions in the Q&A forum. I will then share your questions to the panelists for their verbal response. Attendees will be on mute throughout the program. Now, let's welcome NFU President Rob LaRue for his opening remarks.
Thank you so much, Riley, and good afternoon. We're thrilled to be here today. As Riley mentioned, my name is Rob LaRue, and it is my honor to serve as president of National Farmers Union, a grassroots organization that fights for family farmers and ranchers and their communities. NFU was started in 1902 in large part because farmers were at the mercy of giant monopolies that controlled everything in the marketplace, from farm inputs to the transportation of their final goods. Our early work supported President Roosevelt's efforts to bust up monopolies to restore a free and fair market. Unfortunately, we find ourselves in much the same place today. We are here to launch the Fairness for Farmers campaign. This endeavor has clear goals: to curtail consolidation in agriculture and bust the monopolies which hurt farmers, ranchers, and consumers. I want to thank Senator Jon Tester and Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison for being with us. Along with Senator Klobuchar, they are the leaders in the movement to strengthen and reaffirm our antitrust laws and regulations. Their commitment to economic justice is catching on, and it is building momentum. We have a president who is committed to taking on the challenge of fighting consolidation in agriculture. And I do believe we are in for a fight. The giants which dominate our food and agriculture industry are not going to be toppled without a struggle. But Farmers Union members and everyone joining me today are not afraid of a fight and are ready to stand up for fairness. We are encouraged by President Biden's executive order on promoting competition in the marketplace, a commitment from his administration to restoring fairness to our economy. We are also here because farmers and ranchers cannot afford to wait any longer. Mergers and acquisitions over the decades have made our food supply chain uncompetitive and fragile, and it underpays farmers while overcharging consumers. During the COVID-19 pandemic, extreme concentration in these supply chains was felt in the disruption of meat and poultry processing. Closures or shutdowns at several massive meatpacking plants resulted in lost markets for farmers, constrained supplies, and resulted in higher prices for consumers. The situation also makes market manipulation easier, as shown by price fixing cases all across the livestock sector. Monopolies and the companies that dominate the marketplace are holding farmers back. We know this as well today as we knew it back in 1902. For these reasons, government action is needed now to break up the corporate monopolies that dominate American agriculture. First, across the economy, there must be greater scrutiny of buyer power. Regulators must consider the need for robust competition at all links along the supply chain. Second, rules are needed to restore power to the Packers and Stockyards Act to better protect farmers from abusive processors and integrators. Third, farmers, ranchers, and consumers must be provided with accurate and reliable information through price reporting and product labeling. Fourth, federal and state governments must strengthen food marketing and processing chains to promote competition and build a more resilient food system. Finally, existing antitrust laws must be vigorously enforced and new authorities must be adopted. This campaign, Fairness for Farmers, will help us to ensure that these steps are taken by harnessing the grassroots power of our members and, quite frankly, all farmers and ranchers. Farmers and ranchers are not alone in this. there is increasing recognition that monopolized power across our economy has reached a peak. Corporate consolidation is a threat to the American way of life and democracy itself. But despite those threats, renewed attention to these problems gives us hope. Farmers and ranchers will use their grassroots power to speak up and be heard. We appreciate you joining us today as we make this launch, and I look forward to keeping everyone updated on National Farmers Union's Fairness for Farmers campaign.
Before we let Senator Jon Tester make his remarks, we will briefly show you the website that we are launching today. Here is our website. You can find it on the NFU homepage. We hope that you take some time to look at this deeper following our event. Without further ado, Senator Jon Tester, please share your remarks. You are muted.
Hey, thanks. Look, I hope you can hear me now. Good afternoon. Thank you, guys. I appreciate you inviting me to share a few words with you all today. It is always a pleasure to share the podium with Keith Ellison, and it'll be good to hear from Keith. Look, it's the way the world is today. I happen to be the only actively engaged working farmer in the United States Senate, and I am proud to stand beside National Farmers Union to make sure that farmers, not only in Montana, but across this country, get a fair shake. And not unlike Walt Schweitzer, Farmers Union is just not of my generation. Farmers Union is, my parents were Farmers Union members, my grandparents were Farmers Union members, and I'm proud to tell you that I am one also. It is no secret to anybody on this Zoom event that times are tough in ag country. West of the Mississippi, farmers are dealing with an historic drought that is really putting the hurt on family farms. East of Mississippi, they got more than enough rain. This, coupled with low prices and scarce labor, is a recipe for disaster for folks who feed our country and the world, as well as the rural communities that depend on them. But maybe the biggest threat facing rural America is the ongoing consolidation that we've seen over the past few decades across the ag sector. Consolidation has touched every piece of the ag economy, from grains and inputs to meat packing, and it is far past time to start dealing with it. Rural communities depend upon strong ag markets to survive. Markets depend upon competition and fairness to stay strong. And consumers depend on competitive markets to keep their prices fair. And that's why I'm working on several critical pieces of legislation aimed at addressing consolidation and reintroducing some competition back into the marketplace. Just last week, I teamed up with Senators Booker, Rounds, and Thune to introduce the American Beef Labeling Act. Now, this is what it does. You're going to know. It's called Mandatory Country of Origin Labeling for American beef. It tasked the U.S. Trade Representative to work with the Secretary of Agriculture to develop a World Trade Organization compliant way to reinstate mandatory country of origin labeling for beef within a year. So what happens if they don't do it? If the U.S. Trade Representative can't find a workable solution, then mandatory country of origin labeling will automatically be reinstated. This bill is going to give Montana's cow-calf operators a leg up on competition. It's going to give the consumers the information they need to be able to control what they buy at the supermarket. But that's just a start. We got more to do. We've got to finally put some teeth in the Packers and Stockyards Act. That's why earlier this summer, I introduced another landmark piece of anti-consolidation legislation called the Meatpacking Special Investigator Act. This bill, which I'm partnering with Senators Grassley and Rounds, will take aim at anti-competitive prices and improve national security by creating the Office of Special Investigator for Competition Matters within the Packers and Stockyard Division of the USDA. As a point of interest, we shopped this around to a lot of my Democratic colleagues. We haven't been able to get other folks on this. To not have the USDA have the ability to have subpoena power and investigative powers dedicated to preventing and addressing anti-competitive practices in the meat poultry industries and enforcing our national antitrust laws is a huge mistake. By taking a bite out of consolidation in the meatpacking industry, I hope we can start a movement towards addressing other anti-competitive behavior that has come to dominate every sector of the ag industry and give an advantage back to the family farmers and ranchers of this nation, the backbone of our communities. Finally, I know many of you are eager to see our bipartisan infrastructure bill be signed into law. I am too. I was proud to join a bipartisan group of Democrats, Republicans in the Senate to work with the White House to make urgently needed investments in our nation's crumbling infrastructure without adding to the national debt. There's a lot in this bill from an ag perspective. It will provide billions of dollars to upgrade our roads and bridges, making moving crops to markets faster, safer, alongside critical funds to shore up rural water infrastructure, which I don't need to tell the folks on this Zoom call, is very, very important if we're going to have successful operations. Water is life. It will also connect every home and business in America with high-speed internet, bringing to the rural corners of our country into the 21st century and ensuring that everyone is on an equal playing field. I'm urging the House to get this legislation passed as soon as possible so that these dollars can start being put to use all across this country, but particularly in rural America. With that, I'll turn it back to you. I can't express enough the respect I have for Farmers Union in the state of Montana and nationally. I think you guys are doing great work and you need to keep it up. You're one of the few ag groups out there that actually sticks up for family farm agriculture. And I can't tell you how much I appreciate that, being a family farmer. Thank you.
At this time, we'd like to take a few questions from the press. Remember to please submit your outlet and question in the Q&A forum at the bottom of your screen. We will be taking questions for both Senator Tester and Mr. LaRue. Okay, so Carl Hackinson asks, the meat packers argue that changing anything will cause higher prices at grocery stores. How can we counter that argument?
Look, I think what we have right now, because of consolidation, and not only includes meat packers, it's grains, it's inputs, it's works. If you have competition, that makes the price in the meat locker, in this case, competitive. And look, the last thing that the packers want to do is actually label their meat, because quite frankly, what's going on right now is we're bringing meat in from other countries. We're putting the USDA seal on it, and people think it's USA product. It's not. Some of it is, but it all isn't. And so I think the real thing here is you got to look at who's fighting for what. And I think what these bills are fighting for is they're fighting for the folks in production agriculture, in this case, the cow-calf producers and the medium and small feeders, and the consumer. And I think if you give consumer choice and there's competition in the marketplace, it's beneficial for the consumer. And I think most consumers will tell you they want this choice. And I think you'll see, if we get this implemented, you'll see more competitive prices, which will result in more fair pricing.
Thank you. With that, we are going to move on to our next speaker, Montana Farmers Union President Walter Schweitzer. Senator Tester, thank you so much.
I just want to close by saying Walt Schweitzer is a true jewel in the state of Montana, and he does a great job making sure that Montana farmers and ranchers get a fair shake. And it's a pleasure to be on the panel with Walter. Thank you guys very, very much. I got to scoot.
Thank you, Senator. And I really appreciate all the work you are doing for Montana farmers and also the national farmers. And being a part of this Fairness for Farmers campaign is critically important. And you've been a champion fighter for fairness for decades. And I appreciate it. Thank you much. You know, I think President Biden said it best when he announced his executive orders. This isn't capitalism, it's exploitation. This cheap food policy that we've had for 70 years is more about corporate control of our food dollar than providing us good, cheap food. You know, we bought into this, get bigger, more efficient, and concentrate our processing industry. But this has all come at expense of resiliency. Last year, when consumers were going to the grocery store and being rationed milk, meat, and finding empty counters, while livestock producers were euthanizing livestock and dumping milk down a drain and plowing in vegetable fields. This is a broken system. When I first started farming, Montana produced and processed 70% of our own food. Now it's less than 10%. I used to be able to go to my local grocery store just a few miles away, and the grocery store shelves were full of Montana food. Now I've got to drive hours away to a big corporate monopoly grocery store and buy my food. And in the case of beef and pork, I don't even know where it comes from. It's frustrating. It really is frustrating. But I think we now have the attention of the consumers. We now have the attention of our elected officials. And I think now is the time to take on these corporate monopolies and tell them to play fair. I think it's important that President Biden has put in these executive orders, creating a referee of sorts to blow the whistle when these corporate monopolies are exploiting us. And you know, I think that it's also important that Keith Ellison, Attorney General from Minnesota, is on this call, because they can play in a critical role. Many of the state attorney generals, in part of their work orders, is to prosecute price gouging in the time of a crisis. When we had beef prices going up in the grocery store and livestock producers getting paid less, this is not only price gouging for the producers, but it's price gouging for the consumers. And I really appreciate the work that these leaders are doing for us. And I think that Farmers Union has been fighting for this for over 100 years. And I'm excited that we're finally getting heard. Thank you.
Thank you, Walter. We have a few questions at this time. So Deborah Mills says, lab-grown meat to hit US in 2022, backed by FDA and USDA, along with smarter food safety blueprint and traceability all underway. Big money is backing this effort. Can strict labeling laws be enacted now so we are all clear about the fake meat coming onto the market in a few months?
It's a great question, Riley, and I appreciate this, because everything that we're talking about in this campaign is about making sure that we have a fair, free, and competitive marketplace out there. And some of the tenets of that actually demands that we have accurate label so that consumers know exactly what it is that they have, that we make sure that there is competition and that consumers have choices, and that they understand exactly what those choices are and what it is that they're buying. So I think everything about this campaign, Fairness for Farmers, is about ensuring that as we push for a fair and open and competitive marketplace, that is one that is going to be equitable in treating farmers and ranchers, certainly fair, but has the benefit of also helping all consumers.
Thank you. And thank you for your questions so far, everyone. We realize there are more and we will address them later in the program. But next, please welcome Minnesota Attorney General Keith Ellison.
Well, thank you all for having me. What a pleasure to be with you. Good to see friends from Minnesota and around the country. It's always good to be talking about how we can improve the lives of people who provide our food, our energy, people who look out and are good stewards of the land. That's the goal of National Farmers Union. That's the goal of our Minnesota Farmers Union. And together we're going to stand for what is right for family farms and farmers and ranchers. So good afternoon. I'd like to thank the National Farmers Union and Gary Wardish for inviting me here today to talk about the importance of protecting Minnesota's and the nation's family farms. I would also like to acknowledge my good friend, Senator Klobuchar. I also hear Senator Tester's on the line or has been here. I enjoyed serving with him in Congress, and it's good to be teaming up with them. And I want to thank them for their continued leadership to ensure that our economy benefits all working families, including working farmer families. As you know, Minnesota is a state with a proud agricultural heritage, but there is a disturbing trend that I think we have got to acknowledge and deal with in a forthright way. And this trend is that the numbers of farmers and farms are going in the wrong direction. I think we are better served by more diverse, economically viable, strong farm sector. I don't think that this is just a result of technological changes. I think it is a result of market structure that is unfair and works to the disadvantage of family farmers, but also to customers and also to our environment. And I think we would be better off by having a bigger, more diverse, richer set of farmers who are closer to the land that they work. The total number of farms in Minnesota in 2020 was about 67,000, and that's down about 500 from 2019. And approximately 2/3 of Minnesota's farms had less than $100,000 in sales. The same report found that total land and farms for Minnesota during 2020 was about 25 million acres, which is down 100,000 acres from 2019. And farms in the 10,000 to 100,000 sales class showed a decrease of about 100,000 acres, which means that small are being soaked up by the big. We got to ask ourselves a question. Is this the type of agricultural economy that we want in Minnesota or around the country? My argument and my position would be no, but we've got to get a plan to make sure we reverse this trend. So much national policy is done in the name of the family farmer, but so much of the action that we take is in favor of big industrial producers who are seeking to corner markets. And I think it's time for a change. I think we've got to protect our family farmers and ranchers and reward them for the hard work that they do. And we got to make sure that we set up the policies in place that can keep people on the farm and that can keep people serving the rest of all America in terms of product, in terms of everything that our farmers and ranchers do. I think also that we've got to acknowledge that our family farmers are being really cut down by the corporate consolidation in the agricultural sectors that suck all the profits out of farming and only enrich the top brass in these multinational companies. And so often, Congress and our public policy serves their interest in terms of subsidy, insurance, and a whole range of other services. Actually, if our country is going to really be a country about free enterprise, we need to do more for smaller entities and less for the really big ones. Sadly, the way we do business is that the big get more and the small get less. That's a policy that we should not continue. And this is why I strongly support what this current administration is doing in executive order promoting competition in the marketplace. You know, we need to study this and really dig into it. And I think once again, we need to ensure that hard work pays in our country. Where it is in farms or in restaurants or construction or childcare or travel or leisure activities, we are witnessing too many Americans, unwilling to take open jobs. Why? Because they're being forced to accept pitiful wages that do not respect their commitment or their hard work. Today, too much of our economy is dominated by big companies that use their size and influence to eradicate competition, stifle innovation, and reward those men and women the ones doing the real work with only subsistence pay or compensation or profits in the case of small business and farms. That is why my office is making dealing with antitrust a top priority. We lobbied the Minnesota State Legislature and asked them for more help to do antitrust. They heard our plea. We're adding staff right now. And I have asked my staff not to jump on the big tech bandwagon, which is important, but to focus our attention more in the ag sector. And not only in the ag sector, but for things that rural people need, like access to a hospital, solid broadband access, and access to a local family store, a local community store, which is not just a big giant part of a big giant chain. And so we're doing that, and we want to do it with you. We know we can only be successful together. And when you find, and our office does not do audits, what we do is we respond to complaints. So you all will know far before we ever do that there is unfair, uncompetitive action happening, and we need you to be in touch with us about it. I just want you to know that on the ag front, I was one of 11 attorneys general in Midwestern states that urged the Department of Justice to pursue federal investigation into market concentration and potential price fixing in the cattle industry during the pandemic. If you guys got more ideas on what I need to do, I need to be listening to you, and I will be. Our office, as I said, is devoting more resources, and we are building up ourselves for the fight that is already going on. I want you to know that I'll be working with and encouraging the Biden administration to be tough on these companies that are engaging in anti-competitive behavior, and that if we really are a country about free markets, then they've got to be, then the small farm and the small business have got to get a whole lot more attention than they've been getting over the last 40 years. I'll never forget when I heard one Secretary of Agriculture say to a group of Wisconsin dairy farmers, you got to get big or you got to get out. That is the absolute antithesis of what antitrust legislation is all about. We need to stand tall for small, not just stand up for the big. In conclusion, let me just say that I want to again thank everyone for being here today and for inviting me to be in this conversation. It is a priority of our office. It is where we want to be. We are strengthening all that we do to be more effective in this space, but we know the most important asset we have is our relationship with you. Thank you to the National Farmers Union, Fairness for Farmers campaign. We believe in it. We'll lift it up, and we'll help more people understand that if you eat, you're involved in agriculture. And so everybody needs to be concerned about what's happening in the ag sector with regard to small farmers and medium-sized farmers and ranchers. So let's stick together and let's get the job done. Thank y'all for listening.
Thank you, AG Ellison. We are going to take a few questions at this time. We have Rick Adamski, who asks, is the US government strong enough to change this concentration of power? Are these concentrated powers stronger than the collective power of the US government?
We did it before. It was in a generation before anybody on this call was around. But let me tell you, they passed the Sherman Antitrust Act when you had more market concentration than they have now, or as much. This is the Gilded Age. If anybody wants to get a sense of how things were then, just read The Great Gatsby, right? Or other things. But we have confronted massive market concentration and power before. And the way that we were able to pass the legislation and take the enforcement action is we banded together, we wrote, we talked, we worked together, we shared information, and most of all, we fought back. So my answer is yes, but it's not for the faint of heart, I'll tell you that.
And so we have one more question right now. Can you talk about NFU's approach and role in pending consolidation / deals in the meatpacking sector?
I didn't quite catch that.
NFU's approach and role in pending consolidation or consolidation deals in the meatpacking sector.
Yeah, I can certainly take a stab at that. And Attorney General Ellison, it's so great to have you here. What I would share on NFU's approach and role in pending consolidation deals in the meatpacking sector, but really across all of agriculture, any of these deals that are being considered by DOJ, is we are closely on behalf of all of our farmer and rancher members, meticulously working with DOJ to make sure that we are giving informed information about the effects of these mergers and what they mean out there to the countryside, but also to the economy as a whole. We have consistently done that throughout, and we will continue to do that. We're actually encouraged with kind of a renewed emphasis on the review of these mergers with comments yesterday by the Associate Attorney General, Vinita Gupta, who renewed this call for making sure that there is greater scrutiny for these mergers and acquisitions as they review them because of the impact that this has throughout agriculture. For anyone who was unable to join us to hear those remarks, the Department of Justice has her speech on their webpage. You can also find it at nfu.org and read the entirety of those remarks. But it is clear that the Department of Justice is working closely with the U.S. Department of Agriculture and the rest of government to ensure that all of these pending mergers, future potential deals are going to receive greater scrutiny.
And we have one more question for you, Rob, before we move on to the next portion of our program from Chris Clayton. Do you see Congress moving on the update for mandatory livestock price reporting this year or do a CR on it? If they can't move on that reauthorization, what does that say about prospects of PACR reforms coming out of Congress?
It's a great question, Chris. And, I don't know that I have a good prediction on what is going to happen with mandatory price reporting, whether or not they are going to be able to kind of push this forward, whether they will look at potential changes with it. So without speculating on whether or not it'll be tied to a CR or manage to get accomplished, I think the bigger piece here is the fact that both the Senate and the House continue to look at all the pieces surrounding this. So I think the fact that the argument and the discussion right now is not just an extension of this, but ways to improve it, building in many of the recommendations out of the livestock and cattle meeting that took place in Phoenix with all the groups, including NFU, but trying to keep that those key issues alive, I think continues to give us hope that there will be PACR reform. I might suggest that, it's a beef market reform, really, because it's about improving the conditions for our ranchers out there, making sure that independent ranchers have a fair market, good information. Certainly, we heard from USDA Secretary Vilsack yesterday that they continue to look at all of their authorities that they have without new legislation, whether that's additional reporting information, but then also working with Congress to get new authorities, new clarity to existing statutes. So I think we continue to have a lot of optimism about the potential for PACR reform.
Thank you. We know that there are more questions, but again, we will address more at the end of the program. So next, please welcome Minnesota Farmers Union President Gary Wardish. And thank you again, AG Keith Ellison, for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I want to thank Attorney General Ellison for his work on for family farmers, and not only family farmers, but also consumers. The one thing, Farmers Union, we have a long history of working on these issues, consolidation issues for family farmers. Our roots go back to 1902 and being formed in Texas, basically because the farmer was not getting a fair shake at that point in selling his, cotton in that instance. But that's the roots of Farmers Union, not getting a fair shake, both buying and selling their products. So we formed a cooperative movement to help give farmers a better voice in the marketplace. The Packers and Stockyards Act was passed in 1921 to assure fair competition and fair trade practices, safeguard farmers and ranchers, and to protect consumers from members of the livestock and meat and poultry industries from unfair, deceptive, and discriminatory practices. COVID-19 really exposed the problems that we have in our processing industry, and use the beef processing industry. It really got exposed there. When the plants, some of the plants had to shut down due to the virus and due to their workers getting sick. Those plants were built for efficiency. They weren't built for, at that time, the protection of the workers. They have since addressed those issues, but they were built for efficiency, mainly for the bottom line of their shareholders. But through that time, we had beef producers and ranchers selling livestock, sometimes at a loss, and that the packer was making, from what you hear, is from $1,000 to as high as $1,800 of profit on that animal. That showed up, not only hurt the farmer, but that showed up in the marketplace for the consumer, that the consumer had to pay a significantly higher price for their product. That money didn't end up back in the farmers' hands and didn't end up back in the rural communities. The Packers and Stockyards Act, when that got passed in 21, that was because of the big four. I would argue that we're in the same situation now. We have 4 or 5 packers controlling various industries, whether it's beef, pork, or the poultry. But in the beef industry, you have one, JBS, out of Brazil, and you have one in the pork, Smithfield, out of China. So I would argue we're actually in a worse position now, because a lot of those profits are not even ending up back in our own rural communities. A lot of them profits are going offshore. So I would argue we're in a worse position we are now, or than we were then. You only have to drive around the countryside, whether it's Minnesota or Colorado or Montana, Iowa. All you see in numerous farm sites empty. In a lot of them empty farm sites, you have empty feedlots, you have empty buildings that at one time not only raised livestock, but raised families, were part of their local community. That's the part we're missing. Consolidation is happening not over through the farm sector, and in some respects, it's not the farmer's fault. He doesn't have much choice. But having access to fair, transparent markets, that's what we need. It's definitely needs to be looked at, and we do appreciate the president's executive order on that. COVID-19 really exposed it for everyone to see. And you look in the grocery store chain, you got a half a dozen companies that control all those labels. You got a lot of labels in the store on the shelves. But when you get back to the ownership, there's only a few companies that control all that ownership of those labels. That's where all the profit is going. So this is hitting rural Minnesota and rural America the hardest. It's affecting everybody. It's affecting all consumers. But it is really hitting the rural America the hardest, because all you have to do is look at our small towns, how they're trying to compete and how they're struggling. If you're close to a regional center, the communities do a little better. But if you're more rural, they're really struggling. And a lot of it is due to not as many family farmers on the farm. We are raising similar amounts of livestock on the farms in the nation. The amount of animals is the same or going up, but the amount of farmers producing them is a lot less. I'd argue we are better off having more farmers in control of those animals, but that only works if the farmer is getting a fair shake out of the marketplace. As a farmer, you have to make a profit, and and right now, it's really for all sizes of farmers, whether you're large or small. The transparency in the marketplace and a fair shake is to the benefit of everybody. So it's long overdue. country origin labeling, I appreciate Senator Tester's work on that, and we hope we can get that back in place. As an American farmer or rancher, we're proud of the product that we produce. We don't have, we think the consumer wants that choice in the marketplace. They want that choice. We've always been told by the packers that the consumer is not willing to pay for it. Well, let's put that label on there, give the consumer a choice. There are a lot of consumers that will gladly take the product if they know it's made by their American farmer or rancher. We're still held in a lot of high respect, but we need a fair price to stay on the farm. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wardish. We're going to ask a few more questions now. So Emily Barron-Cadlaw from Modern Farmer asks, the grassroots campaign seems to put a lot of effort and work onto individual farmers who are already working quite hard. What else will NFU do in connection with the individual efforts?
It's a great question. I appreciate that. And it is true that Fairness for Farmers, are organized by National Farmers Union, is about harnessing the grassroots power of farmers and ranchers across the country. We are organizing it as a grassroots campaign because we know that the power of that movement has been so successful in years past. And we understand that when you harness that power and farmers' voices are heard with those who can affect change in government, both at the state and federal level, that we can get real meaningful, lasting change. And so we're trying to do everything we can to connect farmers to each other. This is not only farmers union members, but this is one of these issues that isn't just one organization, right? This is farmers across the country understand, regardless of what they may produce or how they produce or where they produce it, that the deck is stacked against them. And they understand the effect that this has on their livelihoods, their families, their communities, as well as their neighbors who are also in the same situation. And so working collectively together can, first of all, reduce the load of work. I would also stress that farmers are the original kind of multitaskers. They can put food on the table for everyone and care about their community and seek change. And so our job as National Farmers Union and an organizing Fairness for Farmers is about capturing those stories, leveraging that momentum, and pushing for solid, meaningful, lasting change to make sure that we can redirect, rebalance this power back in the hands of farmers and ranchers and their families, and also consumers.
Thank you for your answer, Rob. We have another question from Laura Lundquist. She asked, Farmers Union is backing this, but is there resistance from other ag groups? And if so, why not?
Yeah, I might say, and certainly would also invite President Schweitzer and Wardish to jump in if you wish, but that once again, I would state that this is not just Farmers Union. We're certainly going to step up because our members want to see change. We have conditions right now which are unfair and that we need to seek the change, and we plan to do that. We will step out there. We know that our neighbors who may participate in other organizations are looking for that leadership, are looking for a movement to get behind. And certainly Farmers Union wants to be a part of that effort. Therefore, Fairness for Farmers has been launched, but we will be working collectively with those who feel the same and want to see change.
Yeah, and I can step in, Rob, to it. The Fairness for Farmers, it doesn't matter what stripe you're, what color or what organization you belong to. Farmers need a fair price, no matter what size they are in operation. So it really, we're looking for support from other organizations, and certainly willing to work with them, because this is an issue that affects everybody. It doesn't matter what organization you belong to, and we're glad to step forward on it. But as I said, as Rob said too, we've been. This is one of the reasons why Farmers Union got started. So we're certainly open to working with everybody and looking forward to it.
And I'll jump in here too. Farmers Union is about family farms, is about families. And much of this fairness for farmers is also about fairness for families. And many of the other ag organizations are actually ag industry organizations. They represent the farmer and the corporate monopolies. And so a lot of times their interests are a little bit conflicted. But because Farmers Union, our leaders are elected by producers only. Our policy is decided by producers only. And our emphasis is about the family farm, the producers. And that's who we are going to fight for. And I hope, like Rob and Gary said, that these other organizations will see the importance of fairness for the farmer and fairness for families, and hope and see that they will join us.
Thank you, Walter. Next, we have a question from Leah Douglas from Reuters. She asks, how will fairness for farmers look different than NFU's existing state and federal policy work? What actions will farmers be taking as part of the campaign?
Absolutely. Thanks for the question, Leah. So in many ways, this campaign will look similar to NFU's work because a lot of what we do is about lifting up grassroots voices, lifting up the stories that farmers themselves have. Walter just said this is everything that we do is directed by farmers and their families, our members. This campaign, though, is about taking it to the next level, giving it greater visibility, and giving even greater voice to our members. Much of this effort will be an education to the rest of the countryside to build upon some of the lessons that many consumers saw through the pandemic and understanding the changes that need to happen to build resiliency and a fair food system, again, for consumers and for farmers. It is also going to be challenging farmers to step up and tell those stories. Part of the initial piece of the Fairness for Farmers campaign is about hearing those stories, capturing them on video, capturing them in print, and then sharing those with each other. Many of these stories that we have are ones that our neighbors also know. But taking these stories then to build momentum, build on the momentum that this administration has done, that our key leaders, both in federal government and in state government, there is a real moment here for change, and National Farmers Union plans to do everything it can through Fairness for Farmers to make sure that this momentum, this moment leads to real, meaningful, lasting change.
Thank you, Rob. I think that is actually all the time we have right now. So if you have any additional questions, please feel free to send us an email. And with that, I will let Rob deliver his final statement.
Alrighty. Thanks again, everyone, for taking the time today. In many ways, Fairness for Farmers is about this moment, as we've been talking about, through so many stories, both before the pandemic, in ways that the level of concentration in our food system has become so visible to farmers, and we know the disadvantage that that creates for them. There was actually a question that we didn't have time for, but it talked about we've used livestock because of the pandemic examples and the concentration there, and it's a way that consumers can very quickly see that. But farmers and ranchers know that this concentration affects all of agriculture in crop inputs, in our seed, throughout all of agriculture. This level of concentration is creating problems. And so this moment, Fairness for Farmers, is about capturing all of this momentum, moving it forward, and again, seeking that real, meaningful, lasting change. It is about bringing education to our consumers. It is about educating further our members, and then using that, harnessing that grassroots effort to seek this change. Again, we will keep everyone updated on this campaign as we go forward. We are always open to questions about it. Members and press alike can continue to keep updated at nfu.org. And there you will find a link to the Fairness for Farmers website. Thanks, everyone.